this was the summer of 1978 when you took your first victim.
Right. Once it happened the first time, it just seemed like it had control of my life from there on in. The second occurrence was 1984, roughly. And I met this guy at one of the bars, downtown Milwaukee bars. We went back to the hotel. Just planning on getting drunk. I had put some sleeping pills in his drink to render him unconscious. And was just going to spend the night with him. When I woke up in the morning, my forearms were bruised and his chest was bruised and blood was coming out of his mouth. He was hanging over the side of the bed. And I have no memory of beating him to death, but I must have. And that's when it all started again.
And once it started again, you found it impossible to stop.
Right, that's when the obsession went into full swing.
Man, I'm digging the Stone Phillips, man. He's asking questions and shutting up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Watch him in lots of interviews. He's good. He's good.
Yeah, I like that guy. All right, Greg, what do you got?
Don't have a lot on this one. What I will tell you is listen to the passive language. Listen to the alcohol. There are agents of blame in here that are not him, and you can't miss them. Alcohol has shown up. He's mentioned it more than one time. Alcohol was something else I don't remember. Everything's in passive voice, the second occurrence. And he avoids talking about picking somebody up in a gay bar. I've read that he had issues about his sexuality and never actually came out and said he was gay. But whatever his driver, he's distancing, lots of distancing language from this thing he's done. And we all know he's done it, he's admitting it, but he's still using that distancing language. I don't think of folks like Bundy and Gacy and Ramirez and those guys. None of them seem to care. They've just told you, yeah, I did this and I did that and I buried him in the backyard and I cut him up. But this guy's using distancing language, which makes it odd for me. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah. And severe aberrant behavior is almost always at the intersection of shame and fantasy coming together when those two things are together. There's a ton of distancing language here, but it's almost a dissociative language. While he's talking about a dissociative incident, which he was actually dissociated from the incident, I think it's honest. He's comfortable with describing the severity of the situation. Sensory detail is congruent with the truthful recall of events. And I think he genuinely doesn't recall. And he was probably blacked out, drunk. And I think that there's a lot going on there. That's probably just there's a shame that's preventing some of it from coming out. The shame is the only thing that's really hiding information here. That's my opinion there. Scott, what do you got?
All right. I think this is odd because of the gravity of the violence that must have gone on with him doing all this. And he's explaining it with no emotion and no illustrators. His voice, his cadence and tone stay the same, everything's, but that still makes me feel like he's containing all that. That's why I think you're right, Greg. I think just right under that, man, there's an explosion under there that could happen any second. But he's just short to the point with all of his answers to the question, and this gets more fascinating, I think, as we go along. Because with all that violence that happened, he's, like you were saying, Greg, he's not approaching this as Bundy or some of these others would. It just doesn't fit in the psychopath section yet, not just yet. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. It is pretty extraordinary. It is something that we haven't really seen, I think, before. So he says, it just seemed like it had control of my life. So there's this idea of it. So there is this abdication of responsibility to something else that is not particularly associated with him. But he says it seemed like. So he's vacillating between it was me and it wasn't me. But again, I don't see a lot of deception around that. I don't see him, coming up with an idea to blame. We've seen in other cases of monstrous acts, I'm going to blame pornography and I'm going to blame this, I'm going to blame society. There's no blame, but there's this idea of it seemed like it. that's kind of it. And he's so calm when he's saying that. So it feels to me very, very honest and truthful about this it, but at the same time seemed like it. Like, which one is it? Can you have both at the same time? You maybe can have both at the same time. I have no memory of beating him to death, but then his eyes do move at that point, I think, for approval. So is there some memory? Is there truly no memory? Is there a little bit of memory? Again, I'm not sure. Listen, I just then, after hearing all of that, I just look next to him and I just go, what's that dad doing there? What's he doing there? I just want to go, so why have you come here? Like, what's this really about? That for me is where the interesting interview is, I think. Is like, what are you doing here? Again, I go back to this. Is it about the abdication of responsibility? Is he enjoying this idea of it? Because again, if it's about it, he's totally non-responsible for this. I'm not and then what comes up in my mind is something that was said before by Dahmer in one of the previous videos, where he talks about the divorce, not their divorce, or, you know, mum and dad were getting divorced. It's the divorce. So I'm just thinking there could be something about that instability of mum and dad not being together, and most likely some other violent acts, potentially sexually violent acts from the father. I just don't know. I don't know enough about the story. But huge instability, I imagine, in Dahmer's childhood there, which I think the father has maybe shown up to abdicate himself from. That's all I got on that one.
I think I got figured out why the father's there. Does anybody else figured out why?
Censorship.
Book sales?
It's the book. It's the book.
Yeah. Well, yeah, above and beyond the book sales, yeah.
Yeah, but no, that's what, because, you know, his publicity people are like, we'll get him to talk to Jeffrey. You know, it's like one phone call, and they do the phone call like the old school. I'll call him up and say, Jeffrey, we'll get him, you know. That's what it is. It's about the book. The book company did it. Yeah.
You know, Mark, one of the points you bring up about him using the it, I think the it keeps him from having to talk about how he feels. I think it's a distancing tool for him.
Yeah.
Because he feels really uncomfortable when he talks about what's going on in here.
Yeah. Was it Stephen King who came? Was it his book It? Is that Stephen King? Yeah, it's interesting, the idea of it.
Look at Mark going into the symbolism, man. You're going deep, dude. Go get it.
Well, it's the thing that can't be named, isn't it? That even Stephen King can't name. You can't put a name on it, but it'll kill somebody like a gorilla would kill somebody.
I always said I was going to write a book called Don't Mess With Them, They Kill Kennedy.
They certainly did.
This was the summer of 1978 when you took your first victim.
Right. Once it happened the first time, it just seemed like it had control of my life from there on in. The second occurrence was 1984, roughly. And I met this guy at one of the bars, downtown Milwaukee bars. We went back to the hotel, just planning on getting drunk. I had put some sleeping pills in his drink to render him unconscious. And was just going to spend the night with him. When I woke up in the morning, my forearms were bruised, and his chest was bruised, and blood was coming out of his mouth. He was hanging over the side of the bed, and I have no memory of beating him to death, but I must have. And that's when it all started again.
And once it started again, you found it impossible to stop.
Right, that's when the obsession went into full swing.
If you like this video, get the full body language breakdown and analysis on our main channel by clicking this video right here.